People have everything to live for in modern Ireland, and these young people are no exception. Their lives are filled with opportunity, friends and hope. But these young men and women know another side to life. At some stage in their lives, they've had to grapple with despair, hopelessness and depression. Lots of people suffer from bouts of depression, and that's normal. Some people, however, suffer from more prolonged depression, like I know I did some years ago. The good news is that there's lots of help available. The bad news is, though, that left unattended, depression can lead to suicide, a fact which is a cause of major concern in our society today.
It's a subject that I've had my own direct experience of through life, regrettably, not just once but on more than once. And so I have maybe a little bit of idea of the heartbreak and all that huge fragmentation that accompanies the issue of suicide. What a dreadful, tragic and shattering occurrence that it is, not just bringing a life to a very, very untimely end, but then the devastating impact on those who are left behind. And it is really heartbreaking to have to acknowledge as President of our country that it is the most common cause of death among 15 to 24-year-olds.
When I was 7, my dad died by suicide, and then 13 years later my boyfriend also died by suicide, so I experienced 2 separate suicides in my life. When I was 7 years old, I was too young to understand what had happened to him. I really just understood that Daddy wasn't coming home anymore and that I wasn't going to see him ever again. And I suppose then it took a few years for me to really, I suppose my grief was more drawn out, because then there was all these questions that had to be addressed later on in life, I suppose during my teenage years, when I understood what the word suicide meant and the element of choice that's involved in a death by suicide. So it was really an unbelievably difficult bereavement for us all. But because my mother was so strong, you know, I suppose that gave us hope and us strength as kids. I'm actually off this evening now after this.
Oh, really?
My father's family, obviously, it affected them extremely deeply. Every one of his brothers and his sister were extremely deeply wounded by his death. Everybody felt the elements of guilt, the elements of shock, of shame, all of the normal emotions after someone dies by suicide. Everyone asked the question, why? I suppose you have to just live with the questions, and you do learn to live with the questions. And you think, okay, I have to accept that I can't rationalise this irrational act. I'll never get inside his head and know what he was really thinking at that time. And I have to believe that he wasn't actually thinking about me and my brother and my mother when he did what he did, and that he felt compelled to do it and that he saw no other way out. And so I forgave him for that, and I suppose just continue to love the memory of him.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, no, there's nothing, I mean, I wouldn't.
It's just sort of something that really needs to be spoken about. I was willing to sort of talk to them about it, about my own experience with it and that.
A friend of mine last week committed suicide again.
Really?
It's like the 4th person,
really
close friend that has done this, have gone through the. It's unbelievable.
There's times in my life when I think, God, I wish he was around, you know. He was so into music as well, and I just wanted to, you know, raid his record collection and be able to sort of like share that with him.
Talk about gigs that are going on.
Yeah. I wish I could just show him this song that I wrote, or I wish I could just show him this poem, or I wish I could just put my arms around him and give him a hug.
That was for the Aware gig.
That's right, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Fundraise for the Aware.
Yeah.
Critically, it's doing great. Airplay-wise, it's getting nothing, absolutely nothing.
There are times that come along, like my graduation, like my DEBs, like my Leaving Cert results, like I suppose graduating from university. if I ever do choose to get married or anything, you know, that he won't be there to walk me down the aisle. Just those kind of events in life. It's the same with any bereavement, really. But again, it's the element of choice involved, that he chose to give up all of that with me and with my brother and with my mother. Chose to give away all of those Christmases and birthdays and graduations and all of the special family occasions when you really feel he should have been there. But, you know, I forgive him.
And my husband, Pádraig, died by suicide in 1977. He was 29 years old. We were 7 years married. We had 3 children, 3 girls, and I was 3 months pregnant. He left a note for me on the dressing table in the bedroom. It was 3 lines. It wasn't his usual writing. It was much bigger. The 3 lines read, "I'm sorry, darling Jean. I've always loved you. Pray for me." So I couldn't understand why, you know, the huge why. And that's the grief. With the grief comes anger, desperate guilt. Why couldn't I have prevented this in some way? I was part of his picture, and why, you know, the guilt is just terrible. Was I not a good wife? Was I not a good mother? Had I not loved him enough? What more could I have done? You know, so that's torment in your mind. It's total shock, and with the shock comes a kind of disbelief. I can't really believe this has happened to me. I even said to the guards when we came out of the room, "Is he dead?" You know, there was a disbelief. I knew he couldn't be but anything else but dead, but I still asked the question, "Is he dead?" There's so many feelings going on, and you become quite numb for a few days. People are talking to you, you're not crying or anything, you seem to be okay, but you're actually numb. In the case of every suicide, there is an inquest, and the inquest is to establish the when, how, where and why. Initially, like when the guards investigate the death, they have to establish whether it was suicide or murder. When I was being questioned, my sister was with me, and I said, "Do they think I murdered him?" And she said, "They're just doing their job." The feeling then is just desperate, you know, it's dreadful. I had a great hunger to talk about every little detail of the suicide, the build-up to it, the day it happened, the method used, the event itself, you know, the detail of finding the body, the time afterwards as well, like the funeral, the inquest, and then the first birthday, first Christmas, first anniversary, all that kind of thing. It was very hard to find anyone to listen. People would tell you not to upset yourself and put it behind you, and there's no need to talk about that anymore. They would say things like that, which was very unhelpful. Eventually I went for counselling myself after 7 years, and got very good counselling and long-term therapy, and I never looked back. So then I decided that was the field I wanted to go into, and I started to study and study and study, and it took me about 6 years then to become a counsellor. Most of my clients today are people bereaved by suicide. There's an awful lot of help out there now for suicide bereaved, and it definitely works.
When I was 19, I experienced a second suicide in my life. A boyfriend from college who I loved very deeply. That affected me hugely in that I knew exactly the enormity of what had happened straight away. I can't even explain to you how much pain I was feeling. I mean, if you think of probably the worst pain you've ever felt, multiply it by 1,000,000 and you might be close, you know. It was just so huge, and I've never been the same since. I just didn't feel like anything was worthwhile anymore. Nothing made any sense. I felt so consumed by what had happened to me. I couldn't listen to anybody else. Everything seemed so trivial. And I just wanted to scream my head off all of the time. I just remember being terrified to go to bed at night and just feeling so alone. That I was stuck in this horrible rut of just berating myself like for not noticing signs, constantly asking why, replaying conversations, moments that we'd had together, looking for signs, looking for meaning, you know. That's what happens when someone dies by suicide. That's the reality of it. You're going to be stuck asking the questions forever. I wrote a poem about that death, and there was a line in it that said, "He gave me what he no longer wanted," which sort of means that when he died and he ended his suffering, he passed on his suffering multiplied by infinite to me and his family and his friends. That despair doesn't end with his death, it just merely gets passed on.
There are no easy answers to the question why. The reasons can be varied and complex. The suicide's character traits and coping abilities, support network, life experience, they all have to be taken into account in searching for the answer. For young people, relationship problems or the breakup of a relationship can be a factor. In the 30 to 50 age group, worries about the demands of life, such as work, money or family problems, may be contributory issues. For people over the age of 60, suicide is sometimes related to illness, fatigue or isolation from family and friends. There's also a high suicide rate among members of the gay community. Certain people may be more vulnerable to suicide because of negative childhood experiences such as bullying or sexual or physical abuse. Experiences such as these, if they're kept hidden and unspoken about, can manifest themselves in depression or in other mental illness. For whatever reason, depression is a factor in many suicides.
The day he died was a Saturday, and I only noticed about 2 weeks beforehand that there was any change in him. He was having problems at work, and he said he didn't want to talk to anyone. He would sort it out himself. He was reading a book at the time, and he was halfway through the book, and later I read the book myself, and in it was graphic details of a suicide, and he copied it exactly the same.
Because I experienced two separate suicides in my life, and there were two totally different people with totally different lives and totally different expectations and loves and dreams and feelings, I suppose I saw the futility of trying to offer a simplistic explanation, a catch-all statement for why people die by suicide. Blame comes up then a lot of the time, you know, people get blamed, and or circumstances get blamed, like he wasn't doing well in college, or, you know, he'd fallen out with a friend, or he'd broken up with a girlfriend, and all of these, you know, trivial things like, and these things happen to people every day, you know, and not everybody dies by suicide after something like that. So I really feel that simplistic explanations serve no purpose whatsoever, and they do nothing, only make the people left behind feel worse for not helping them out or doing something. But it's an internal thing. If somebody dies by suicide, I think it comes from in here as opposed to anything outside. It's about their coping mechanisms. And although it might be about their coping mechanisms in relation to something that might be happening in their life, I still believe that it is an internal thing and that there's nothing anybody could do to stop it, and that there's nothing anybody could do to save this person unless they want to be helped or unless they ask for help.
But if you're depressed or feeling suicidal, how do you know when you should look for help? Most people experience normal depression, that is, feeling a bit low for a few days and then coming out of it naturally. But if you experience an unrelieved sadness or hopelessness that lasts some weeks, then you need to look for help.
You could talk to a trusted friend or a member of the family. You could pay a visit to your local doctor, or you could call one of the helplines for people suffering from depression. And if you're a student, why not make an appointment to see the college counsellor? Talking about the problem is one way of relieving it.
All of us in Irish society need to open up about depression and how to cope with it. One group leading the way in helping to discuss depression is the Blues Society in NUI Maynooth.
I set up the Blues Society here in NUI Maynooth last year in September. I suffered from depression 2 years ago whilst attending Maynooth, and I took 2 years out. When I came back, I realised there was a need for a support group within a college. There was a need to stress that people suffer and they're alone and, you know, they need help. So I approached the Students' Union. They thought it was a great idea, went about setting it up, put out the idea on Thursday, got positive and negative feedback, but by the end of the year it was all positive.
I'm the current president of the Blues Society this year, and already it's a fairly solid year for the Blues Society. We have a lot of things planned, but more importantly than actually being a society, we're a support group. That's what we pride ourselves on. We want to let students know that we're there for them if they need to come and just talk to someone, or they need help, basically. We offer a wide range of services, and we can put them in contact with counsellors. We advise them to go and see their doctors if need be. And we also liaise with the academic advisory office here in the college, just to, you know, help relieve some of the stress caused by academic work, which is a massive contribution to stress in college life.
First thing off anyway is we got good news back from the Students' Union. Just got over the 500 mark, which is great for us.
Yeah.
The Spoke did a write-up of it as well, which is great.
One of the main aims of the society has been since the start, and will continue to be, to remove the stigma attached to the illness.
You come in and the amount of people that attend, I mean, even out of curiosity.
People come to us at different stages of the illness. Some really just need to talk to someone and don't know where to go. Others are at the polar opposite end. They're in the worst part of the illness itself. But the main idea of the society is, no matter what level you're at, that you can just talk to someone, because being able to relate the illness to someone who has suffered themselves or are going through it, it's the biggest relief in the world.
A night on.
Just talking to someone is the first step towards becoming healthy again, becoming balanced.
When I first set up the Blues Society, I did feel, oh God, what are people going to think of me? You know, they'll know I've suffered from depression. Is this going to ruin my social life forever? You know, especially when I went on open house and nationally, I was like, oh, I'm never going to have a life. But it was actually the opposite. I feel it's very important to understand that this isn't you. You didn't ask for this. A lot of people have various illnesses that they're not ashamed of. They take their medication and they get on with their normal lives. Depression should be the same way. I'm not ashamed to admit that I have suffered from depression. I've come out the other end, so I do feel that it's an incredibly lonely, hard time for anyone that goes through it, but it has made me into the person I am now. It's, you know, given me confidence and self-assured, and I look back and realise that if I can get through something like that, I can tackle life head on.
I was lucky to come across the Blue Society on Thursday. It's really helped me. I got to know people, I went out, I had a good time, and I think it's definitely what got me to where I am right now, which is second year, and as long as it's going well, and please God it always will be, everything around college for me will be grand.
Life naturally has its ups and downs. Life can't be good all the time. There are times in our lives that are difficult, that are stressful, and it's to push through that. If there's a bad period in your life, it's not a permanent thing. It will change. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It's always a temporary problem. If you're feeling suicidal, hold out. Things will change. Tomorrow will be different.
Coping with life's problems is really a matter of meeting challenges, big and small, as they arise. No one is ever in a position of total control. So it's worth remembering. Talk your problem over with a friend or with a professional, and take one day at a time. Be flexible. As Jean says, problems come and go, and it's not really realistic to expect to be happy all of the time. Sometimes in life, it's the simple things that work really well, and they're the things that get us through. Physical exercise, for example, helps to release pent-up anger and frustration, and it produces the body's happy hormones. So, go for a swim, or take the bike out, bring the dog for a walk, and try to eat well. This might all sound very simple, but it really does help.
After I experienced a second death through suicide, I myself, I suppose, obviously became really down, really low. I mean, I hit rock bottom, I really did. Which is understandable as a reaction to such a huge trauma and a huge life event.
We're in the biggest studio in Munich.
When I was down that low, I really didn't see any way out of it. I couldn't see how life could go on or how I could ever be happy again.
Going off touring and you're...
But you do have to bear with it and feel the pain and live through it. And I did come back out of it, and I did get a renewed sense of life and loving life and wanting to live life again. Good evening, everybody. You're listening to The Stew with Ciara O'Connor.
It's called Queen of the Broken Hearted. 2, 3, 4.
No matter what reason you're depressed, you're going to come back out of it. It's just the natural sort of progression from darkness to light. When I was feeling depressed myself, although I felt I couldn't see a way out, I knew that suicide was never the answer because of the absolute just devastation that it leaves behind. Suicide is never, ever an option for me, and it shouldn't be for anybody, because you really do create, you've no idea, unless you go through experiencing a suicide yourself, you have no idea the absolute torture it is to lose someone in that way. And so that's why, for me, no matter how bad things got, I just knew I couldn't do that to my friends and family. I couldn't do what had been done to me.
A very important aspect of suicide prevention has been identified as the need to promote self-esteem, self-confidence, those very coping skills in our young people, to equip them for life, to make them copers, so that they can face into life's problems and emerge at the far side of them safe. Life's problems repeat themselves from generation to generation, and very few worries or problems in this world are new. But if you are 15, the world's accumulated wisdom is not always visible or accessible. We want them to be able to open up to talk about their emotions and their fears, and to realise that they don't have to go that journey entirely on their own, that there are people around who can help them.
Console provides counselling and support to persons bereaved by suicide. You can contact Console on their helpline 1800 201 890, and that's a free phone call, or visit www.console.ie. The Samaritans provide confidential emotional support 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. On their helpline, 1850 60 90 90 in the Republic, or 0345 90 90 90 from the North. And for further information, you can visit their website, www.samaritans.org.
It's for other people to take notice and to show that they care. The things not to say are pull yourself together, think about your family, don't be wallowing in self-pity. The things to say are, how can I help you? Is there anything I can do? Maybe encourage the person to go to their GP. Say you're there for them, you'll bring them and stay with them if they are actually suicidal, if they're talking about killing themselves, because they may do.
Alcohol is a factor in a high percentage of suicides. How are you, Brian?
Good. Thanks.
Great.
Usual, yes?
Yes, please. Rock Shandy. Thanks, Brian. When someone is feeling depressed, alcohol may or may not help to relieve the pain and confusion, but usually only for a very short while. When the effects of the alcohol lift, the pain and the confusion caused by the problems are all still there. The body's natural protection system, which we call inhibitors, look after us. But the problem is that when there's too much alcohol in the system, the inhibitors collapse. And sometimes we can end up doing something that we regret.
Cheers. Enjoy, Gareth.
Cheers, Brian. Thank you. So if you're feeling down, if you're feeling depressed, take my advice. Stay away from alcohol. So if a member of your family has a problem with alcohol, maybe you should talk to Al-Anon or Alateen. And if you think you have a problem with alcohol, why not talk to Alcoholics Anonymous? Anything you tell them will be in strict confidence, and you'll get telephone numbers for all of these organisations in your local phone directory. Remember, there's always somebody there who can help you.
It is important to realise that sometimes something terrible happens to you, but you can learn from the experience and grow from it as well and become a different person and a better person.
There's hope to be found everywhere, there's happiness to be found everywhere. No matter what your external circumstances are, you can find that. And I think that I look for the positive in most things. Sometimes I have to remind myself to, and sometimes I do get bogged down with little problems. But I think advice for anybody who is feeling like the way that I've been there and felt, and feeling really down, is look around you, count your blessings. I know they might be hard to see, you might be so used to looking at them, it might be friends, family, but look around them, look around you and see how much people love you and how much people care about you and all the things that you have, rather than focusing on what you don't have.
And that's what I did, you know. I remarried again and went on to have 3 more children. So I had 3 boys with the second husband and 4 girls with the first. So eventually things kind of come round again.
Life's pretty good, you know, especially when you come out of something really big like that, down in the depths, and then you come out the other side. You can really fully appreciate the good stuff in life.